everyone. Start recording now. And yeah, otherwise than that, I'm just going to start getting into it and I will let people in as they trickle in. But this is designed to be fun, ideally. That is always my goal with these things. I get into astrology and fashion because I find both of them enjoyable and I want to share that with other people. Uh, And I mean, with that, I mean, we're talking about clothing, we're talking about style, something that we have to do every day, but there's definitely no reason to spend time with it. At least the way that we're told, right? We're told, I mean, my whole life, right? I'm into fashion, but it's not serious. Or, I like what I wear, but, what is that? Does that really mean anything? Is that really going to do anything for me? And I mean, one of the things I love about astrology is that it allows me to think really, let's see. Hello, Angel. Thank you for attending. Um, One of the things that I love about astrology is it allows me to find the meaning in the mundane and not in a way that's just my mind imposing on it, but when I really sort of learn the language and spend time with these like little mundane parts of my life, I can see just how much power and significance they have. And I've certainly found that with my clothes, and astrology and understanding it from that lens has only given me more power and more authenticity in myself. And so I'm really excited to share this with you because, like I said, it's like we have to get dressed every day. Why not make it fun and magical? So, a bit about me, a bit about why this in general. So I've been practicing astrology for about 8 years, a Venus cycle, and basically when I kind of got over a lot of my prejudices around it, it's like I couldn't ever stop studying it. I mean, just the way that it helped me understand my life and other people, but also like be more embodied in my world was just so important for me. But even more than astrology, it's like I've been interested in fashion since middle school. I think from a pretty young age, it became like a really potent way for me to express myself, to understand myself, and actually to be understood in a way that it's like nothing else I did could really do. Just to give an example, I grew up in a pretty conservative suburban town where I really felt like no matter what I said and what I did, I was never really understood or taken on my terms. If you're part of my email list, you'll have heard me talk about this. But it felt like by the time I got to high school, kind of resigning myself to, I'm just going to dress like a freak. And I don't know if anyone else is going to understand it. It just came to this point where I suddenly would like overhear people talking about my clothes in like a positive way, and they seem to admire this work that I put into developing my unique sense of style. And that's kind of the first time I really tuned into, okay, clothing is really important, not just for knowing myself, but for, yes, speaking what language couldn't. And I have this picture up here as a more recent example of like the power of fashion. So I took a road trip to go to a college friend's wedding where I knew like maybe 3 people, and I was very much like worried, like I'm not gonna have a good time. I don't know if this is gonna be good, but I'm at least gonna go fit it up and go in as myself. And if everyone doesn't get me, then I'll just leave. And at first, I was actually almost intimidated to wear this outfit. You can see it's like these big pink earrings and this like very sculptural pink and yellow top, very solar, which makes sense for me as a Leo rising. And literally, like the first moment that I like walked down the hotel stairs to get to the reception, wedding guests came up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, what is your outfit? You look so amazing," right? And it's like throughout the whole night, like I never had to work to meet new people. It's like my outfit spoke for me. And right, this is just one of the different ways that fashion can affect us and speak for us. And maybe you don't want to necessarily be seen, or maybe you don't, authenticity is not your number one goal, right? And I want to leave space for that. But for me, like there's something extremely affirming to being noticed for my clothes. And the more I can kind of connect that to, oh, this makes sense for my astrology to my ultimate becoming, yeah, the more power I have when working with my clothes. And maybe sometimes I don't want to be seen, and my clothes can accommodate that. But what I'm really trying to do is help you open up the spectrum for what you can speak or what sort of language you're going to use with your fashion, and that it all can be included. So after that introduction, I'll just give you a little taste of what we will be covering in this lecture. So first, I'm just going to do a basic intro of what is the connection between astrology and style? Why can we even talk about the planets at all when it comes to our clothing? How planets manifest as certain styles? And then we'll get more into what do I mean when I say style icon? How does one become a style icon? And then I'll get into the more the nitty gritty of what parts of your chart I focus on when it comes to figuring out your aesthetic, your divine aesthetic, if you want to call it. So I recommend, if you want to, you can pull up your charts and follow along. So you can begin to sort of put it together. And to help you with that as well, I'm going to apply this method to the chart and style of Rihanna. She really does a good job illustrating of just how complex our style can be while still being ourselves. And then I'll start to give you some ideas of how to put it all together yourself, how to begin embodying your divine style, and how to really marry these astrological techniques with what is true for you. Because I think the kind of overall thing is that, as I said, I want this to be fun, and I don't want this to just be another addition or another standard to hold yourself to. One of my favorite quotes comes from John Audubon, and he says, if the bird and the book disagree, always believe the bird. And what he's basically saying is, right, if you read something about yourself but it doesn't feel true to you, right, follow what feels true. So, take what is useful, what makes you excited to get dressed, what gives you ideas, and leave the rest. Okay. So if we're talking about astrology and fashion, we are talking about correspondences. So, right when you first kind of started in astrology, especially, from a more contemporary lens, as I did, you're going to see it, much more abstractly, right? It's going to represent personality, or it's, these sort of like, numbers and symbols disembodied, right? And I think the thing that really hammers home just how important and how expressive astrology can be is how tangible it is, how we can find bits of the celestial, the bits of the divine in everything, right? I mean, there's something kind of animist about it. At the very least, it tells you that like the mundane is never just that, right? And it is through kind of understanding, using your own observation, you can see that this division between like objects and spirit it's false, right? And so correspondences, if you're not familiar with this idea, says that the archetypal energies of the planets can be found in each person, place, object, etc., right? And ideally, right, you can figure that out if you understand the vibe of the planet. So, as Priscilla Costello, another astrologer, says, right, by connecting the lush, beautiful rose to the planet Venus, right, who is the goddess of beauty and nice smells, right, we can infuse it with meaning and exalt it beyond being merely a dead and meaningless material object, right? And the same thing goes for our clothes, right? If we can begin to understand, right, as I was saying before, right, Mars is hot and he's fiery and he's severing, right? So things that have like a sharp, very loud, bold vibe to them correspond to Mars, right? And so they confirm, right, that even the mundane objects like the clothes we wear or the food we eat is filled with divine influence and significance. And as someone who likes to think a lot, I love that. And to kind of bring that a further step, Thomas More, who's a psychotherapist as well as an astrologer, he has this really great book about embodying the planets called The Planets Within. And in the beginning, he's talking about how our adornments or the things we find beautiful or dress ourselves up with are not merely surface level, right? He says that from the way we design our cities to the choice of the clothes we wear, we are creating an environment with a particular kind of spirit. Clothes, for example, are not only reflect something of the nature of the soul, they also nourish it with a particular kind of spirit. So there's a bit of, I found that in this process, there has to be a bit of trust. It's like my mind is like, why would putting on an outfit change how I feel? But time and time again, it does. And here he's saying it can like feed like our very true essence of self. And yeah, and when we can begin to be in control of them, right, we can use the planets in so many different ways to, in planets and fashion in so many different ways for so many different purposes. So the reason I first thought about getting into astrology and fashion was first of all, I wanted to make astrology tangible and enjoyable for non astrologers. Most of the people in my life who are interested in astrology are not necessarily going to learn how to read a chart, but everyone has to get dressed, right? Everyone knows the
Oh,
pain as well as the beauty that is involved in
oh,
putting on an outfit every day. So the first way you kind of hear about planetary dressing is having to do with like planetary days. So with this, if you're not familiar, you can see here that each planet corresponds with a certain day of the week. And I was kind of taught if I want to work with Mars, for example, on Mars Day, Tuesday, I wear red, right? Because that is one of Mars's color. But I created my styling with the stars work because I was like, okay, but how do we get beyond color, right? What are the styles and the vibes and the specific garments I can wear to channel Mars? And so you can do that in a more sort of just like sequential way, like each day of the week, maybe you meet with the sun on Sunday and then you meet with the moon on Monday. And then you can be more specific about it, right? So if you want to increase your mental acuity and flexibility, just dress like Mercury during those days, right? That is, remediation in astrology is this idea that, right, we can call in certain planetary energies to enhance them if we want to bring in more of them. And then the next step beyond that is less about meeting a certain planet and it's more about meeting yourself and understanding that your aesthetic is can contain multitudes. There's going to be different parts depending on what you're trying to do or what you're feeling on a certain day. But if you look at the parts of the chart that have to do with our aesthetic or our sense of self, you can begin to have a core sense of, okay, I know what an outfit for me looks like, even if it looks, different from the day to day. And that's, I think, something that really inspired me as well of just like, yeah, how can this help us be even more ourselves in a way that is, yeah, joyful and doing magic. And, with that, a big question I had as I was looking at, people's charts and their aesthetics is like, what makes a style icon? What makes someone, yeah, worthy of setting trends? Or, why do we keep returning to them as fashion touchstones over a period of time? And at first, I was kind of frustrated because I would compare all of these different charts of these like style mavens, and they didn't have anything in common, right? It's like they didn't have a particular Venus placement, they didn't have, a certain rising sign or like, aspect. There was nothing in common with them. So I was like, kind of doubting myself at first. Like, am I completely making this up? Is like, can I not, find someone's style from their chart? But then I started focusing on individuals and really comparing their unique sense of style, like to their specific chart. And then it just really broke open to me that there's no specific signature to be a style icon. Like someone is a style icon if they so embrace their particular aesthetic so hard that it becomes a trend. And you see that from like, the really, beautiful, like unique glam of Grace Jones to this like, Princess Diana is literally wearing bike shorts and a sweatshirt here. Like nothing that impressive, but it's like how many girlies are trying to like cop that look because that's that Cancer, sun style. So I find that really hopeful that, all of us can impress or,
what?
your clothes in so many different ways. It just really depends on trusting yourself and, depending on your chart configuration, maybe being a little brave or like doing some work with visibility. But I find that when I really lean into that, it's like so much opens up. So where would we look to figure out someone's style icon status? Well, usually where I pretty much always start for chart readings, which is the ascendant, right? So I am calling this, right, who you were born to be. Um, right? Because of, sun sign astrology, we tend to see the sun as this like core identity, and he is, but the ascendant is so much more specific to us. It is where heaven and earth meet. It is how we both move through the world, as well as like what we want to attract and bring in, right? So if you're ruled by Venus, for example, right, things that involve like enjoyment and harmony and eros is important, right? If you're ruled by Mercury, it's going to be things that stoke your curiosity or your sense of playfulness. Um, but it's also very much like where we present, how we present to the outside world as well, in this very like immediate sense. You might have heard your ascendant being called your mask, right? Or if you're just meeting someone at a party, you meet their rising sign. And that is true, but it's like the outside appearance that also speaks to the self and the essence. So when it comes to your fashion sense, right, your ascendant and particularly the ruling planet, as I'm mentioning, will tell you what kind of clothing will make you feel most like yourself. That sort of, immaterial sense of like, this is me, right? So what help, particularly what outfits help you move through the world and be perceived in a way that aligns with your inner experience. So it's very much about like taking the inside and expressing it outside in myriad different ways. And just if you're not familiar with your ruling planet, I have the list here. So if you're in Aries or Scorpio, for example, Mars is really gonna be that key, like unlocking sense of self. So right, so I mentioned, I really want to emphasize looking at your ruling planet, but planets in the first will also be really important, and maybe even more so at times. And that's gonna really tell you, your kind of general archetypes and the styles to lean on to accomplish this goal. So here, for example, I have the chart of Stevie Nicks. She is a Taurus rising. And we'll see here that Taurus is ruled by Venus, and she has the planet Venus in Cancer. So in some ways, it's like, right, she's ruled by this, desire to connect and attract and bring forth like what is beautiful and alluring. But being in Cancer, the sign of the moon, there's going to be that like more kind of witchy, mysterious, light and dark quality to it. And I feel like, her style is legendary. On the one hand, it's extremely, feminine, a lot of, dresses and very flowy capes. And I find that Moon Venus, like they have a lot in common because they're both very flowing and wet and connective planets. So I feel like the kind of loose billowy silhouettes really speaks to both of them, but also the fact that like her persona is basically like this like this witch that you don't mess with. I feel like she just so embodies like at both like the beauty and the mystery of being ruled by that Venus in Cancer. Check. If at any point anyone wants any questions or clarification, please feel free to add it to the chat, but I'm just going to keep going. So after you kind of get your kind of core sense of style, the ascendant being like, this is who I want to be, Venus, I find, right, she speaks more to, okay, but these are the things I like, right? These are the aesthetics that I value, not because of any like highfalutin idea of like my sense of self, but just in that very like Venusian instinctual way of like, I'm drawn to this color and not that one, right? I like this outfit, but not like that, right? So, she very much is our value and our taste, which, yeah, can't really be reasoned with. But that's also like following that, right? I feel like that's where our sense of style really begins to develop, right? So, she's very much anything that, involves beauty and adornment is related to Venus, right? Abu Mashar says that clothing in general, right? Adornments of gold and silver and jewel, appreciation of the body, sensuality, beautiful appearances, beautiful clothes, basically anything that makes us feel good or makes us look good, it falls under Venus, right? So, right, what trends or styles bring you joy or make you feel beautiful? I really find that the ascendant is sort of like kind of, yeah, the core essence. And then Venus kind of speaks to like the toolbox, right? Or the specific actual items of clothing that you then use to express that, kind of ascendant sense of self. So, so you would look to primarily, the ruler of your Venus, right, to get a general sense of her aesthetic. Then you would add in, aspects which can serve to complicate or add texture. So if you have Venus conjoined Mars, right, even if it's in Libra, if it's, in her own sign, that Mars presence is going to demand an edge, demand more of a sense of shock rather than Venus in, on her own is more wants to kind of not blend in, but, sort of fit the vibe or the aesthetic. And then you also want to factor in house placement to determine the area of life you like to dress for, or sort of like, yeah, what sort of occasions you tend to, be drawn towards dressing for. And then something I find extra helpful is drawing in the decan of your Venus. If you're not familiar, a decan is a subdivision of the zodiac, right? So there's 30 degrees in each sign. A decan divides them into three 10-degree sections. And I find that when I speak to someone's Venus placement to their specific decan, I just get such a, more specific delineation. So here I have as an example, Tyler, the Creator, who is a Leo rising, but he's ruled by a Venus in Aries. And I love Venus in Aries, particularly for aesthetic, because this is very much like he is here to stand out and to turn heads and to, in some ways, cause, controversy through his look, right? Mars can be very like, confrontational and ready to take on a challenge. And with Venus, that will be in like the realm of aesthetics. But also I find that, Venus in this middle decan of Aries, which we'll talk about more later, this is a very like kingly kind of royal side of Aries, where it's like, he's not necessarily just looking to like, be different. He's looking to kind of create his own like sense of style that is wholly unique to him. And I mean, just the fact, he literally has his own fashion label, Golf Wang. And I think even his look from the Igor era feels extremely Venus and Aries, where, right, obviously there's a lot of pinks, a lot of soft colors, but in these like really like stark color blocked way. And I feel like he plays with like beauty and ugliness in a really compelling way, which feels very Venus and Aries. And being in the ninth house, which is very much about like, the big picture and long-term goals. It's like there's this sense of he's always looking to push the envelope and innovate, right? Every album, I feel like he has a new aesthetic. And yeah, Venus and Aries really speaks to, it's like on being on the cutting edge, right? As a Leo rising, he wants to be authentic to himself, but he's going to draw on things that, push him and push, the norms, as he decides to dress himself. Okay. So the next point, and this is actually a more recent addition to my fashion pantheon, is the midheaven, which I am seeing here is the public self, or a sense of aspiration. So the midheaven in the sky basically highlights, this is like the height, like when, the planets, orbit around the Earth, when a planet is near the midheaven or the medium Caeli, do not ask me to pronounce that. It is the highest it can be in the sky, right? There is a sense of culmination and elevation to this. In some ways, it's like if the ascendant is like who we are on the ground, right? We're always looking up to the midheaven. There's always a sense of aspiration, as well as a sense of like, this is like our more public, far away self, right? People who don't know us intimately might not know, that we're afraid of the dark or we really like milkshakes. But from far away, they're going to see, oh, this is your career, this is your role, right? This is the communities you're a part of. These are your relationships, right? With celebrities, I feel like we see their midheaven strongest because we don't know them intimately, but we're seeing them do their thing, right? So praxis is another big midheaven word, which is like, how do we actually like embody and act out our aspirations? And with it, Manilius also brings in that there's a sense of being, glory, distinction, and honors. Like we are we are separated and we are given prizes or, senses of achievement from the things that come from our midheaven. So we're striving towards that. And it's also a huge part of visibility. So I really feel like when it comes to fashion, the midheaven helps you access the self you want to be, the professional persona, how to dress when you want to be seen. So whereas the ascendant, right, if you're ruled by Saturn, right, Saturn is has to do with like, obscurity and secrets. So, being seen might not be your top priority. But the midheaven outfit is kind of what you put on, when you want to be professional or you want to sort of, yeah, I mean, fake it till you make it is kind of a thing, or dress for the job you want, right? Even if it's not an actual job, it's just like I want to be like the I want to be the banshee in the forest who everyone is afraid of, right? The midheaven will tell you what to dress for, in that way. So there's this weird, so I feel like this is really a point of like manifestation or like bringing change into your life in a way that elevates you. So, right, to delineate, look first at the planetary ruler of your midheaven to get a sense of what vibe or desires are leading your aspirational style. Then examine any planets near the midheaven to get a sense of your core public identity. So, planets on the midheaven are going to feel more immediate. So if you do have a planet like in your 10th or approaching the MC is what it looks like in your chart, then that's going to be loud, but it's going to be colored by the planet, whatever planet rules that one. So for here, I thought a really interesting example was Charlie XCX, who her midheaven is just in Pisces, so ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter, I really associate with really eclectic looks, very like billowy, spacious silhouettes, a lot of really bright and bold colors. So if you just have the Pisces midheaven, like I don't know, like if that in and of itself really encapsulates Charlie style. But then you look to her actual Jupiter placement, right, which rules Pisces, and you see she has Jupiter in Virgo, co-present the moon. And so I feel like whereas, Pisces is very expansive and wants to try a lot of different things and explore and how much can it include, right? Virgo is the sign of the technician and the analyst. Virgo wants to sort of narrow down or sort of more fix, not necessarily fix, but come up with a method or a specific routine around fashion. And I feel like on the one hand, she does wear a lot of billowy clothes, right? But they're, tend to be more like in the grays and the black family, right? She, I feel like she finds a lot of inspiration and like kind of having that limited palette, which feels very like Virgoan. And then it's also co-present the moon, right? Which I think also like is why she has, more billowy looks. What else do I want to say about this? There's a cheekiness to it as well, which to me feels, very Jupiter moon. Yeah, and there's a sense too, it's like, even though, yeah, she, that might not be, the first way you describe her as Jupiter. It's like she's just the way that she sort of like brings in all of these like very trendy styles, which feels also very moon, like she feels very on trend, but she does it in this way that is like so uniquely and specifically her and feels just very, very streamlined. Let's see. And so those are kind of like the main touchstones that I would look to sort of form your core style. But there are many other places that I like looking at as well. And also depending on maybe what particular issue or topic you really want to focus on when it comes to your aesthetic. So a place I also really like looking to is the fifth house, which you'll see it's the house with the number 5 there. Right. And this is, and the fifth house has to do with play and enjoyment, creativity, romance, children. So to me, it's kind of like this is where you go to have fun with your style and to experiment. The fifth house is also very much associated with Venus. So like Venus, it can also give you another clue as to like what kind of styles you like, as well as, yeah, what can help you, push the envelope. If you want to know your actual wardrobe or like what what are the actual physical clothing items you have and what's your relationship to being resourced in that way, you would look to the second house and planets in or like ruling that. So For example, here I have Frida Kahlo's chart. Her second house is Virgo, ruled by Mercury, right? So she has Mercury in the first. So very much like her desires, her sense of self is really what is going to determine, right, the things she has. She has, maybe more agency over her wardrobe than other people. And then if you want to speak more to the spiritual potential, or you want to do even more magic with your clothing, then I would pay attention to a calculated point called the lot of Eros. If you use any like Hellenistic chart calculations, they will show this, like AstroSeek or Astro.com. But it's not something that you could try to calculate it, but I certainly can't. And this, I found that whenever I'm doing something that like really aligns with my like larger path, I feel like my lot of arrows style really comes out. And then there's something that I developed, which I explain more in my Styling with the Stars Volume 2, which is the Almutin of style. So if you're not familiar in astrology, the Almutin is like roughly translates from Arabic as like the winner or the victor, and it speaks to depending on a topic, what is the planet that has the most control or is the most sway. And basically I calculate it by looking at these, other fashion points and finding which planet, is the strongest or has the most weight. It's kind of a technical point. I'm not going to get too into it now. But like I said, it's in my book. And something I find really helpful about that is still having all of these disparate points, but the Almutin narrows it down. So I have one particular planet that's like, okay, if I can, keep going back to this one, then I know that I'm doing okay. I know that I'm really aligned with myself. So for me, for example, my Almutin of style is Jupiter. And I know that like the more I can expand my style or like find myself in as many different looks as possible, then I'm on the right track, right? Without thinking about all of the other style factors in my chart all the time. Okay, so if we're going to begin to start putting it together, or like how do we take all these different points and begin to apply that to a chart. So to just reiterate, right, the ascendant is like that core sense of the core sense of self, right, wanting to act and make itself manifest. Venus are the clothing, accessories, and styles you like, right, which are the pieces from which you accomplish the goals of the rising sign. And then the midheaven is how you take your core sense of style and make it more public facing or part of your role. I feel like, this is like style in action, right? Style that helps you not just be or feel nice, but to begin to do things in the world. So, right, ascendant, style is like, who am I? Venus is, what do I like? And midheaven is, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And so to kind of show you how to begin to piece it together, how that looks like in action. I wanted to spend time with Rihanna's chart, who, I mean, she speaks for herself. I'm not going to say too much about her other than, I mean, I feel like for as long as I've been aware of her, I've been aware of her incredible style and how it's shifted and how many different looks and personas she can take on while still being essentially her. And part of that is, starting with the ascendant, she's a lot going on. So this is a C-rated chart. The exact rising sign degree is not exact, but I think we're all pretty sure that she's an Aries rising. And analyzing her chart, it makes a lot of sense. So first thing, right, she is ruled by Mars, right? So first and foremost, right, her sort of core sense of self comes through standing out, through being herself, through acting, and being just like, I mean, the bad bitch that she is. I find that right on its own, Mars style, like in some ways, like a lot of style icons have detriment Mars, like Mars ruled by I mean, not detriment Mars, detriment Venus, so either Venus in Scorpio or Venus in Aries, because Venus on her own is not so much about standing out, but Venus in a Mars ruled sign very much is. And I think in virtually every way and in every look that she's ever given us, I don't think she's ever not made a statement or really distinguished herself like as a sovereign individual. I mean, she even went through this whole era with red hair. I mean, her down to her pregnancy announcements, using public attention to not just like show herself off, but to like have an outfit that supports that. um and but beyond that, I mean, if she was just an Aries rising, that would be one thing. But she also has the planets, the moon, Venus, and Jupiter in the first house, and they all play a role. I like this quote from Valens where he talks about these three planets in combination. He says, Jupiter, Venus, and the moon cause vigorous, famous men, high priests, prize winners, overseers of temples and shrines, benefactors, men eager for fame, catering to the pleasures of the masses, of cities or of villages, right? And become very spectacular in their manner of life. So, right, Venus and Jupiter, the two benefics, whenever they're together, it's like extreme luxury and adornment and going over the top. And I feel like, yeah, like I keep saying, you're never really disappointed from her look, because she always, like, part of her sense of self is being like this, luxurious, enviable person. Like that's something else you see with this combination is like people are like your life. You're like, there's something so charmed about you that people are envious of you. And luckily, she hasn't shied away from that. She's like, please, like, project all you want onto me. I'm not going to pay attention. And yeah, and I think the moon in the first really speaks to, yeah, just like I said, how much like, her pregnancies, right? The moon is very much associated with childbirth, like have become part of like, announcing them and having photo shoots, or like what, the first outfit she's seen in when she's like, showing people that she's pregnant has become like a huge Rihanna related events. And then, yeah, and then that Venus piece, it's like there's something extremely, right? Venus is, yeah, the things that we like and we're attracted to. And I feel like she's gone through so many different eras. But the Jupiter piece is like, what are the bigger meanings? One sec. Or concepts behind. Let me see. Ooh, I love what Angel says here. I love her more grotesque look. They look so beautiful on her. Like her anti-album looks, or what she did for Paper Magazine. She dressed up like a nun, and exactly. Or like I think of like her S&M era, like when I think came out when I was like in middle school or something, and I was like, oh my God. Like it was so like she excites you, right? She like and then part of that is the way she plays with like what is considered grotesque. But the fact that Venus and Jupiter are there is like, even when she's going more like ugly or non-conventional, like she always like how can she ever not be beautiful? And right, and that's where it's like, but that's something else for her to consider as well, is like being ruled by Mars, especially as a woman, is just like you existing like is gonna cause controversy. So why not like lean into it? Right. I mean, she has her loyal man who knows that she's number one, right? Have her having gone through Drake talking about her in every album, right? Just she's bigger than that, right? Her style shows that she is like nothing can really touch her because she knows herself so well. So let's see. Yeah, and I mean I wanted to add this Vogue quote as well, right? Where she's not the type of star to pull a look from the runway and simply wear it exactly as it first shown, right? She doesn't go with the flow or just do what is trendy. Not to say that there's not a place for that, but being an Aries rising, it's like, how can you push the envelope? Right? She takes a more eclectic approach to styling, often infusing high and low elements for an always more interesting end result. That feels very like lunar to me, right? Moon is associated with the people and the public. So being not needing to like stand out all the time to feel like yourself, but still combining that with that kind of like regal Aries energy, right? So this just goes on, right? Fuzzy hats, opera coat with ripped jeans, right? It's the stark contrast that feels very martial, right? And just yeah, what more is more Mars than nothing is off limits, right? And pulling off what most people wouldn't expect. I mean, I love this look from I think her first pregnancy with like this vintage pink coat and like a bare belly and like the jewels on it. It's like I can't imagine anyone else even thinking of that, right? And that's something too with Aries is the pioneer, is the innovator. Yeah, and then to take it a little further, right? So I'm, mentioned Venus and Aries quite a bit, particularly the second decan, right? So being ruled by Mars, it's going to be edgy and bold and iconoclastic. But something that I found in my Venus decan research is like I associate, Mars usually with a more kind of like messy or like rough and tumble vibe. But this second decan is ruled by the sun, right? Who is the king, right? So there's much more of a sense of regalness to it. And I think you can kind of see it with these Aries lines that Valence talks about, right? Men born under this sign will be brilliant, distinguished, authoritarian, just, hard on offenders, free, governing, bold, boastful, haughty, intimidating. So it's like part of her appeal is like she's not like this soldier figure, she is like this powerful queen archetype. And with that, it's like her style of trend is very much like, this is who I am today, this is what I'm expressing. And yeah, and just by doing that, I'm going to, just start some trends. And she very much has that sort of martial, sporty look as well. I mean, she's wearing a lot of camo. I think she wears athletic wear really well, but in a way that, yeah, like sometimes she can be very dressed up, but I feel like the moon in the first is also like, I'll show up in a really casual outfit and still like blow you all out of the water. Is there anything else? But yeah, I feel like there's more coherence and there's more formality with this second decan of Aries. That is definitely what I found in my research. So yeah, I've going ahead of myself, but some other things I associate with Aries too is, right, powerful aesthetic composure, right? Really knowing who you are and expressing that. Attention on their terms, only revealing what they wish to reveal, right? So you only know about what's happening to Rihanna when when she knows, and then you really find out, i.e., she announces her pregnancy at the Super Bowl. Command through aesthetics, right? Elegant, classy, yet distinct, and following their own unique taste. Like, I also feel like this Swarovski crystal dress she wore is like so Venus and Mars, where it's like these beautiful, made jewels, but like she's basically naked underneath. And like she has her arms covered sometimes, but maybe not. And like the controversy, right? The reaction, is part of the fun. And I also added in, I'm also, one of my specialties in astrology is the fixed stars. And something I'm thinking about is like how the fixed stars influence aesthetics. So we'll just add that her Venus is conjoined a star I really love called Alpheratz, who is the head of the maiden, head of Andromeda, but is also connected to the Pegasus constellation. So it's very much about combining freedom and connection, right? I just can't help but think of like the Vogue cover she had with, I think, her children and her partner ASAP. But it's like she's in front, he's taking care of the kids, she's front and center. It's like, yeah, she'll like, claim him publicly as long as he knows that her freedom and her independence and her power like have to coexist and be part of their connection as well. And so I think she does a good job with, yeah, just again and again, this allure mixed with this, distinction, this boldness of like, yeah, yeah, sure, you're going to be interested in me, but that's not why I dress how I dress. Okay. And then her midheaven, right, speaks to, I think her greater aspirations, which we see more and more with, she hasn't come out with an album in a long time. She's much more focusing on, Fenty Beauty and Savage X Fenty, her makeup and lingerie, which are still, right, ultimately about like adornment and aesthetics, right? She is a Venus in the first person, but her midheaven is in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, which she also has in Capricorn. So it's very clear that, like, in that sort of like aspirational, active, far away sense, she's like Saturn through and through, which, yeah, I mean, so classically, kind of functional business attire, more kind of classic staples and basics, like whatever you'd kind of see in a magazine that falls under like a capsule wardrobe of just like, oh, these are the must-haves that you must have, and they're like a trench coat and like a pair of nice blue jeans or whatever, like basic but classy. That's very Saturn. And right, like I said, that just fits in so well with kind of not what she's perceived at, not who she is, which is going to be that Aries, but what she's aspiring to and what she's actually doing in her day to day. So it's like, I'm just thinking about how like many people, right? I would love if she would go back into the studio, but also like, who am I to tell Rihanna what to do? And yeah, and I mean, I love how she expresses this in her style too, because it like I feel like, Saturn, is opposite the sun in many ways. The sun is like, this is me and I'm going to stand out. Saturn is like, I'm just going to go with the tried and true. And maybe sometimes I don't want to think about what I have to wear. Right. And that's, what is useful about, you know, moving in, in a more business direction is like there's a dress code and there's a particular way that you want to dress. And with that really strong, really angular Saturn, it's like I'm sure her clothes uh, are a big part of like kind of armoring herself or sort of getting into the headspace of being more, business mogul Rihanna. And it speaks to like, that is kind of her ultimate aspiration, is not necessarily like to only just be an artist, but to be someone in control of her finances, be in control of her life, which is the way the music industry is set up, is just, yeah, not going to happen for her. Let's see. Yes, Tina brings in a good point. MC in the Cap is about wearing brands that have a great reputation for quality that they've built over time. Exactly. And this is something that not that, sorry. This is something that I really associate with Saturnian people is Saturn is timelessness. Whereas the moon is going to be more trendy and like novelty. Saturn is like, what brands are well made, are well tailored, and yeah, well, I can rely on them, over a long period of time. And yeah, and I'm sure like ideally that is also what she is thinking about for her own businesses. And yeah, something that she's also very much, yeah, trying to embody. And I feel like, yeah, she is very well versed in fashion and style, and I think wears a lot of timeless pieces really well, while still right in that Aries way, making them her own, right? It's like, yeah, it's all present. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, it's you can just tell from her presence what the command she has of herself, and how for all the different looks, like they all feel distinctly Rihanna. And so, yeah, it's just some ideas or just like how to begin putting it together. So one is to, yeah, compare and contrast, right? Like the styles of the planets that are loudest, maybe like your Venus ruler and your ascendant ruler. And then, right, find pieces that can, incorporate looks. I mean, and to me, as a Jupiter person, I feel like that's what I'm really interested in, is like, how do we combine aesthetics? So right, one example I gave is like, right, if Saturn and Mars are really loud for you, like, maybe a structured, vintage blazer for Saturn over like a revealing dress for Mars. Or like, I feel like, this, Rihanna dress, like it's white and it's flowy, which feels very moon, but it's also revealing, which feels Mars, right? It's not necessarily, just landing on one note. And that's why I also say, yeah, finding points of similarity between styles as well. So I mentioned Venus and then the moon, both like, softer colors and looser silhouettes. Let's see, the sun and Jupiter to me, both like dramatic pieces. And I think working together, like things that sort of like help you stand out or like distinguish yourself, can also be both of those things. Um, yeah, I mean, I could keep going on and on about that. Venus and Mars. Yeah, Venus and Mars would be more, I feel like, a contrast, where it's like maybe you'd have like a really cute lacy top, but you wouldn't wear a bra underneath or something if you want to go that way. But yeah, I mean, I think this is where it really gets fun, is beginning to define for yourself what, what is the intersection of these looks based on what feels good to me and what I like. And honestly, I mean, yeah, letting your sense of desire, of intuition really lead the way. And then I think through doing that, you begin to look back and be like, oh, I can see how this part is Mars and this part is Mercury and this part is the sun. But it's, yeah, like I feel like it's a whole language that, I mean, I've only really just begun to understand. And there's so much to it that I mean, eventually I want to do a whole guidebook just on like how to combine planetary aesthetics. But to just, yeah, further reiterate, right? As you're beginning to dress for a day, or right, if you're not using planetary days, but just like coming to your core style, right? Consider what why you're trying to get dressed in the morning, right? If you want to feel good, if you want to attract people, right? If you want to be more in kind of like your lover romance era, then Venus is going to be the way to go. Or if you just want to have a good time, right? If you want to be given gifts and enjoyment, then go with your Venus and your Venus sign. Ascendant is good for like self definition, for authenticity. This is who I am, and this is, what I want to attract and embody. And then the midheaven is good for any sort of like public, professional, aspirational thing. Social media, uh, like that's a really, if you're doing anything present or authentic or visible online, then I would really look to the midheaven. Um, and then, right, there's so many different ways to combine it, as I keep emphasizing. And let's see. Yeah, but as I keep emphasizing, like trust yourself, right? Trust what feels good. Like if that's not kind of leading the way, like if Venus is not kind of present, then it just becomes this other imposition. Right. So yeah, know when to drop all the astrology, like, right. Be aware of like when it becomes too much. Right. And experiment. Maybe if you could just, even just focusing on one particular planet and working with one planet at the end of this, I feel like that is a great place to start. And then, I mean, a huge thing that's been important for me is like cleaning out my closet regularly, not always being in a state of like wanting to look for new pieces or buying things, because that helps you define what isn't for you. And maybe there are things that you outgrew or used to be authentic to you, but you're stepping into a new era and it's not. And I find that by doing that, not only am I given new ideas because I'm looking through my closet, but I'm also, yeah, it just, there's something too about like limitations creating style. I feel like that's something that if you talk to me at all, I'm going to keep emphasizing, right? If we can really define what isn't for us, then we can really get good at coming up with creative ways to interact with things that are more aligned with us. There's just, yeah, that feels like the Mars part of me. That's just like, when I know what isn't for me, I can actually be open to what is. So, yeah. And I think that's something to look for is, we are in this world of constant micro trends and, there's this era and this aesthetic and, it's always changing and growing. If we can move through that with a sense of discernment of, oh, I'm going to engage with that, but I'm not going to engage with that. It's like, yeah, we actually have a sense of center, a sense of ourselves. And with that, right, keeping track of your many interests and inspirations, as I've mentioned a lot, having like a Pinterest board that I update regularly is like so crucial to just like remember what I even like or to give me outfit ideas or to try out new things. Right. And so I also, right, tracking outfits over time, right, taking pics of what does and doesn't work. So you can, right, begin to notice. It's one of those things where like you can think about it all you want, but until you actually are in the practice of like really dressing for yourself, um, sorry, I'm just gonna look at that. Yeah, then that is how it is built, right? We're used to doing things very diurnally, right? Which is, more kind of solar from the big picture. But this is an intimate process, right? Of being with yourself on the day to day and yeah, trusting yourself to experiment, right? I mean, it took me years of like honing out, like, okay, Chloe, like you think you keep liking these pieces, but it never feels right. Or like you think you want to buy that piece, but this is what you actually need. Like, but but I do it because it's fun. I do it because I enjoy the process. In the worst case scenario, something won't feel right. And then you can try again. Um, and I mean, part of the reason I have created these Astro Fashion consults is because if I didn't, then I mean, it's one thing to, right, think about this experientially. It's one thing, it's another to, what am I saying? It's one thing to research this and to use my astro knowledge to figure out what I think the style of Mercury is. It's a wholly other thing to see it in practice and to actually talk with other people about what being ruled by Venus actually means to them or how it actually looks. So I, created this because I want to help people begin to understand their unique style and give them ideas and maybe give them a language or helpful structures for how to go about dressing for themselves in a way that speaks to all of their different needs and situations. So I'm running a discounted early bird price for the next week. So if you are interested in that, please snag that. We will be talking, it will basically going through the whole process of what I just explained with Rihanna's ascendant, Venus, midheaven, and then adding in the other pieces as needed. And then I also have my guidebooks if you'd rather do it yourself or look for yourself. If you want to understand the style of the planets and their particular archetypes, then volume 1 is good. Volume 2 gets into a lot of what I discussed now, how to analyze your chart according to your divine style. And it also gets into like the Almutin of style. And then Styling with the Stars, Volume 3 is really fun. I go through Venus through the decans. I basically had hundreds of people fill out a style survey along with their like Venus degree. So I could really, hone in on, okay, this is what Aries 3 style is versus like Pisces 2 versus Pisces 1. And this is very much like a cookbook style. So if you just know the degree of your Venus, and you can apply this to your ascendant and midheaven as well. But if you just know that you're a Virgo 2, then you can just flip to the Virgo 2 essay and have like a lot of really good ideas as well. So those are my options. I want to open it up to questions. I saw that there were some already in the chat. Charlie asks, Charlie said first, a thought about how the dark house is like the 12th might be like dressing to be in solitude. 100%. I find that dark house dressing is, very much about like working through a mystery with your clothes, going through a descent, like how you dress for yourself when you're not seen, right? Can be just as crucial for your becoming, if not more, than when you are seen. And then Charlie also asks, what did you mean with that we can find out what colors we like when we look at the 5th house? So what I'm more saying is, and so the 5th house is what's called the joy of Venus, which means that Venus really likes being in the 5th house, in part because there's an affinity there. So the 5th house is traditionally called the house of children, which you can then extrapolate into the things that we create from ourselves, right? There's a creativity to it that is supportive of our sense of self, but it's not the same thing. So generally when things are in the 5th house, they're about pleasure, they're about enjoyment, they're about connection, they're about kind of excitement and play. Basically all the like enjoyable parts of our life can be found in the 5th house, like all the tangible enjoyable parts. So in some ways it's like if you want to know like more about like what you like and what you're attracted to like in that Venus way, then you would look to the 5th house. But because I also see, the 5th house is like a place that's very like creative and fertile, like there's also a sense of novelty to it. So the 5th house will kind of be a place of like, this is like the kind of, like, this is what you want to experiment with, right? If you want to sort of expand your style or like, incorporate something new, then you would look to the 5th house. But it's one of those things where like I'm not necessarily always going to bring it up in a consult because I feel like the Venus does a lot of work with it. But yeah, the 5th house is just like another place of like you enjoy playing here. So, right. So if Saturn's there, like maybe, trying things that are more mysterious, right? Or like playing with like not being seen or, doing things that seem more like witchy, or like, goth, scary styles can be a place to play. Or figuring out like your style basic or your version of like style staples could be like a Venus in the 5th house thing. Okay, so Angel K is asking, is Pluto a planet that has a certain style? Of course, Charlie, because they have Pluto in the 5th. So to be honest, I have not focused a ton on the outer planets with this work, in part because I do think that they function differently. And I think you can get a lot of information out of the traditional. But at the same time, it's like, I'm not like I have experienced, sorry, my cat is trying to sit on my laptop. I have experienced enough outer planet transits to be like, yeah, this does matter. So if I had to kind of talk about Pluto as a style, Pluto just intensifies and darkens and like makes everything like yeah, more like, I mean, Pluto, right, is the name of the god of the underworld. I think it would kind of act like a combination of maybe Mars and Saturn, like adding more like mystery and power, like an edginess, right? Like Pluto wants to like create extreme changes. So I could also see that with the with Pluto in the fifth, like like your play is not going to be so playful. It's like you experiment to have like really stark shifts in style and having like a really defined eras. And there's something to like Pluto is very much about power. So I think it's about like, yeah, drawing on like, yeah, looks that like draw a lot of not necessarily attention, but make you feel, yeah, I mean, a little bigger than yourself or part of like larger cycles. um yeah, I would especially track these if Pluto is like transiting your fifth, or is transiting, or a personal planet. I think that's when you're going to feel it the most. Or say when like Venus conjoins your Pluto, that might be a time of like being really like getting really deep into like, yeah, what is my style? And does it actually satisfy me all the way to the bottom? Right. So just being open to like style transformations and not necessarily worrying about like continuity, right? But letting, these big kind of, you know, underworldy shifts kind of happen through your looks. Okay. Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like it's been really cool to see like my thoughts and my research about this like really congeal and really be reflected in people. I feel like, I mean, there's plenty of styles that I still feel like I'm understanding and still trying to get to the bottom of. Like Mercury style, I feel like is actually really hard to pin down, which makes sense, right? Mercury is the planet of fluidity and not ever being in one place. Because on the one hand, like there is like a very like there can be this very like colorful and chaotic and zany side to it. But when I was doing research on like Gemini Venus decans in particular, there was like a really strong like grunge and like goth side to it too. So I feel like that's something like I'm still like I'm very interested in like constantly yeah, improving my delineations, because yeah, I've just met too many like mercurial dressers to be like, oh, you're all gonna dress like dark academia, or like you're all gonna like pattern mix, as Tina says. But it's interesting, like pattern mixing I find is true in like for both Mercury and Jupiter. Like they can both be very expansive, but whereas Jupiter is more concerned with like coherence, or like having some like maybe like base color range, or like the patterns that kind of they kind of fit in the same family. Mercury is like, how many different colors and patterns can I like play around with like in the same look, and how many like heads can I like make turn and be like, huh, what about that? It's like there's like this yeah, this like reveling in juxtaposition and chaos, whereas I feel like Jupiter is like, I want to find something more coherent. Yeah, and then new outfit combinations, this is very much something I find for like Mercury and the Moon a lot. Novelty, right? They're both like very like like the faster moving planets, right? So they're going to find much more of a sense of style through change. Whereas Saturn and Jupiter, right, the slower moving planets, are like they want to establish a more kind of fixed vibe or aesthetic, and then like really work on like committing to that and like really exhausting all of its different contours. Does anyone else have any questions or things that they would like to share? I obviously love talking about all of this. Anything else I want to share? Let's see. God, thank you, Andrea. Yeah, I'm so happy to do this. It's like, yeah, it's one of those things where like, yeah, it's funny to be into some, I have a lot in the fifth house, and that's kind of where I get this experimentation. It's like I can't ever just like do something that's pre-established. Like I always have to like make it new, which can be a risk because it's like I'm just, using my mind to figure out if what these planetary archetypes look like. And yeah, it's just been really affirming to share that with people. Um, Ooh, I love that. Pop some intuition open like a tarot reading. That is exactly what I want this to do. And that's what I've really found this work to be successful at. Like, this work is not here to supplant your intuition or your fashion sense. This is to help you understand it more, to maybe come up with a language or understand, like, oh, I feel really sporty in this moment, but then I feel really glam then. And then this can maybe show you, like, right, maybe the sportiness is for your career, and then the glam is just for your day to day. Maybe you're that type of diva. And with that, you can also then, right, if you, right, so Angel's asking, what are some ways to explore Mars style more, right? If you can begin to understand, right, here are all the ways that Mars style can manifest, right, there's all these different things you can experiment with that still feel like you. So Mars style is honestly one of my favorite to explore. My Jupiter is ruled by Mars, and so I feel like in some ways, anything that feels bold or daring or could potentially upset someone, like that's Mars in a big way. So, like, whereas Venus can be like sensual, right? She's more like slips and bathrobes. Mars is like, I'm going to wear latex and lingerie as outerwear. Maybe you'll see a nip, maybe you won't. I don't care. Like, that's part of like the impact. That's like one style of Mars. There's kind of, I found this really interesting quality with, so Leo 3 is a Mars decan. And something I found consistently with like Leo 3 Venuses is they're like, just me showing up as my normal, like, is way more stylish than other people. Like, there's a sense of like competition and like standing out with Mars at times. And that can also, but in a more kind of mundane way, Mars is athletic wear. Mars is health goth. Mars is not athleisure, but like the things you need to wear when you need to move your body. So that can also be like Mars profession things. Like, think of what a metalsmith or a baker or a surgeon would wear, right? Anything involving like sharp edges or like cut things. So like a punk aesthetic, like, fishnets I really associate with Mars, a ripped up old band tee, right? Anything sort of like, rock and roll, like resembling like the rebellious youth or something can be very Mars. Was there any other? What else do I use to dress like Mars? And then, of course, red and black. Like, if I don't have any other inspiration, then I'll just go for like the more sort of like color, yeah, colors that are very like bold and saturated and might give you a headache if you look too long. Whereas like the sun is going to be red in a more kind of like warm sunsetty way. Mars is going to be red in a way that makes you think of like blood and allure and like, attraction, repulsion. So like that's what's really cool about Mars is it can be really practical and very much like I'm just here to do a job, or it can be very much like I'm going to attract attention in a way that makes you kind of scared. So I really call on Mars. It's like when I want to stand out and I don't really care what people, if that like upsets anyone. Like, reminds me, I was wearing this like see-through skirt, like slip skirt that had like this beautiful like barbed wire and chain painted onto it. And I was like in the grocery store with my brother, and there was like this old woman who was just staring at me. And I was like, great, amazing. Please, come on. Um, yeah, so that's my Mars spiel. And then Nikki says, I'm so glad that it affirms how you feel about clothing and how you move through the world. Like an inspire exactly, right? This is about you and what feels good. And if you can follow that, with the help of astrology, it's like there's really no limit to what you can do with your clothes and what sort of magic it can bring to your life. And yeah, if no one else has any questions, I think, yeah, that is where I will end. This was great. Thank you all for being such a lovely audience. Like I said, this will be uploaded to YouTube sooner rather than later. And yeah, as I said, I have many products if you want to learn more. And yeah, and also if you have any further questions that come up later, you can comment on the YouTube video when it comes out and I will answer them because yeah, I think more people should be styling with the stars. So yeah, thank everyone again. I will be closing out the meeting and hopefully I will meet some of you in the consult space. Okay, have a good one.